Cute, 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 cute.
There we go. And I think we should be good. So I'll go ahead and begin. Hello and welcome to our last panel of the day for Trans Pride VR 2025. I'm joined here by some wonderful folks from the Trans Lifeline, an amazing nonprofit organization dedicated to providing resources and assistance for the trans community, both online and off. So I'd like to introduce our amazing panelists, Steph and Allen, visiting us both from the VR world and the real life realm as well. Starting off, of course, with introductions. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves and what you do at Trans Lifeline?
I'll go first. Hi, I'm Steph. I help with fundraising at Trans Lifeline. I do gaming and streaming partnerships, so I handle all the Tiltify, all the Discord, some of the Blue Sky, and I also offer free tutoring for OBS and help getting smaller streamers a chance to grow. Alan?
Amazing.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alan. My pronouns are he, him. I work at Trans Lifeline as a hotline operator. I also train new incoming operators. I train volunteers and staff members, and I am responsible for writing our training content. So I do a multitude of things, but I do ultimately probably spend most of my time taking calls on the hotline. Really happy to be here. Really glad that I was invited into this panel. So thank you very much.
And thank you very much for being here. It's wonderful to see you both, and especially providing lifeline work is such a valuable thing and something that saves a lot of people's lives day in and day out. So thank you so much for the work that you put in for this. Speaking of what you do, a lot of people can be often quite confused, especially when it comes to nonprofits and what nonprofits tend to do and offer to different communities. So if someone were to ask you, what is Trans Lifeline? How would you explain it to them?
Alan, would you like to start?
Sure, I can definitely start. So I think the very basic premise behind Trans Lifeline is the philosophy that we take care of us. So we are a hotline that takes calls from trans, non-binary, and questioning people. We are entirely staffed by transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people as well. So there is, almost zero chance that if you call the hotline, you're going to get, some cisgender operator at the other end of the line. Everyone here is of trans experience. And we think that's a really important aspect of making sure that we can talk to people in crisis in a way that best serves them. So I think the other thing that I want to say about Trans Lifeline that's very unique among, I would say, hotlines in the US is that we take an entirely peer support oriented approach to helping people in crisis. And what that means is that we, kind of operate outside of the medical model and outside of the clinical model. And this is really important because it means that we value people's autonomy above all else. And here's the most, I think, kind of important point. A lot of other hotlines are basically just go-betweens between like a caller and 911, so the police. And at Trans Lifeline, we absolutely, under no circumstances, call 911 on our callers, even if they disclose to us that they're experiencing suicidal ideation, because we recognize the extreme risk that doing so would put our community in. And so we de-escalate our callers in crisis without any sort of intervention from police, EMTs, etc. Again, we operate outside of those systems, recognizing the systemic harm that could come out of participating in a model or embracing a model where, again, 911 intervention occurs without someone's consent. So I know that's a very long-winded answer, but those are the things that we do. And I think the really important parts of our work that make us different from a lot of other hotlines.
Wonderful. Amazing. Seth, do you have anything to add to Alan's take on Trans Lifeline and
I mean,
what it does?
that more than covers it. And also there's so much more that I could add. Talking about safe hotlines, we have an advocacy department that did a multi-year study into the damages of 988 and the problems with 988. If you're unfamiliar, 988 is the federal hotline that is unfortunately getting defunded, even though there's problems with it that we bring up in our report. It's still a resource, and it's unfortunate that it's getting defunded. But yeah, the rate of non-consensual interventions, it's hard to know because most of these hotlines don't disclose how often they're doing it, but it could be as high as 12% of callers are getting transferred into, getting a crisis response non-consensually to where they are. And generally, we believe in the power of seenness, the power of peer support, like being able to express yourself honestly is such an important part of being seen. And it's such a shame that other hotlines have people needing to censor themselves, or they're very afraid that something bad is going to happen if they're just honest. Whereas on Trans Lifeline, you don't have to worry about that. And I'm sure Alan can talk to that more as a hotline operator about how relieving it must be to hear that we don't do any non-consensual interventions.
Wonderful. Absolutely amazing. Yeah, especially the pressures of knowing if someone who's hearing your state of crisis and telling them the full extent of it could get you into more trouble or could get you into a situation you don't want to be in is a terrifying, terrifying prospect for many, many people. And having a place where it's safe to do that is something that is very, very much needed. And I'm sure the people who are calling into your hotline are eternally grateful for it. Our next question is going to be, what made you want to get involved in this kind of work? And how did you find your way to your current role? Starting with Steph.
Yeah, go ahead. Sure. I know Alan and I have very different stories here, but I first started with Trans Lifeline oh no, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. But like just as a contractor, I was a streamer at the time that was regularly raising money for Trans Lifeline. And eventually I got contacted to help Trans Lifeline figure out what Twitch was. Like, why are we getting money from Twitch? What's happening? So I took a Trans Lifeline rep to TwitchCon essentially, and help the executive director at the time figure out what Twitch was. And then fast forward, I stopped streaming, and there was some personnel and leadership changes at Trans Lifeline. And once again, they're like, "What is this Twitch thing?" And they ended up reaching out to me. So I don't stream anymore, but I love to help streamers because I understand a lot about what they're going through and the benefits that they have as creating these little peer support spaces online. And that's really aligned with Trans Lifeline. We are all about the power of peer support. So I love to help foster community online and help support these streamers so that they can do a better job of creating these networks of safety. And shout out to Trans Academy for doing exactly that in this new scale, in this new medium of VR. Creating this peer support space and curating it is such a tremendous, tremendous thing. And Trans Lifeline supports you. I want to support you, and stoked to be here.
Well, I think I can speak for the entirety of the Academy when I say thank you for your support and for all that you want to do to help us grow as a community as well. That's absolutely amazing. And it's great to see communities like this supporting each other. Alan, same question to you. What made you want to get involved with this kind of work?
Yeah, so I'll give you a bit of a background. Again, I hope it's not too long-winded, but the kind of journey here was significant for me for a number of reasons. So I always kind of wanted to work in this field, and I did get a master's degree in general psychology. If any of you have any familiarity with, you know, psychology related like academics, you know, it's sometimes very, very hard to get established in the field or in any aspect of the field. And if you get your bachelor's, you're not going to really, yeah. Anyway, so I had this degree, and I was actually working at a homeless shelter, and it was awful. Not because of the people who were there. I loved the people and I loved serving them, but the way that I was instructed by leadership and higher ups to treat people who were experiencing homelessness. So, long story short, I got out of that job. I was homeless for a while. Unfortunately, common experience for a lot of trans people. And then I had a friend who worked at the organization who asked me if I would be willing to just do some contractual hours with Trans Lifeline, helping to design curriculum. And that was really awesome. I worked maybe 10 hours a month initially, and then over time that turned into a more long-term and permanent position. I've been here for 5.5 years. I started right before the pandemic, which is kind of hard to believe at this point. But it was such a relief, honestly, to work in a non-punitive, non-carceral, organization that again prized and respected people's autonomy and did not perform non-consensual interventions. So yeah, that's again my kind of long-winded answer, but I kind of got my foot in the door, and then I became a staff member over time.
Wonderful. And you said that now you are not just in charge of operating the hotline, but also helping to train and advise folks who are learning that. Would you like to talk a little bit about that before we move to our next question?
Sure. So Trans Lifeline, we were fortunate enough to be able to hire a number of new staff operators recently, and we also regularly, kind of on a rolling basis, accept volunteer operators. And the volunteer operators can be kind of the backbone of our organization sometimes, because I think without them, we would not be able to pull off the call answer rate that we have now. So whenever a volunteer or a new staff member enters the hotline department, I am one of the three people who are basically responsible for onboarding them and training them. And so training is a kind of intensive endeavor. We present, what we call webinar sessions. Sometimes those can be pretty lengthy, but we also kind of supervise people as they take their first calls. So I'm one of the, again, three people who are responsible for supervising and monitoring and teaching every step of the way. And what's been really great about it is that not only have I watched people gain some incredible like peer support skills, but it's strengthened my relationship with community members as well. And now I have like contacts throughout the US and Canada. So it's been really awesome. And some of our volunteers stay on for years and like show up to their shifts extremely consistently. It's not a requirement that you do that, but it is really great to see the level of engagement.
It's really wonderful. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for that answer. Our next question is, I believe, going to be more for Steph for the gaming and streaming side. What is one cool or surprising thing that's happened through your work in online communities?
Hard to pick one, but something I do biannually is a streamathon, like a Twitch raid train relay. And my favorite one is every year is for Trans Week of Visibility. We do a relay of only trans and non-binary and gender non-conforming streamers. So our last one, this Trans Week of Visibility, we had to extend it to 8 days because we had too many streamers.
Oh
We had
my.
we had like 75 different streamers, and the raid train passed off over 100 times without any problems. So that would be the surprising thing, that it worked so well. That was the first time it's been so successful. But yeah, that's been really fun. I love that because it's like, I get to. It is quite the puzzle to put all these streamers together in a so they all have the time slot that they like and they're okay with who they're rating. But then I get to kind of tweak things a little bit to try to get small streamers to get rated by big streamers and just kind of share the love, and everyone's in the Discord together helping each other, and just like this temporary space where we're aligning on a mission together. It's a really fun thing to do. So if you are a trans or queer streamer and you're listening to me now, feel free to email me and reach out at steph@translifeline.org if you'd like to be added to my contact list. Usually I'm just kind of vouching people in, and also, as the momentum is built so much that it's starting to get a little difficult to fit everyone in, but would be really excited to meet more people. And while I'm shilling my email, I also do free lessons in OBS and teaching. So if you have any you want some help figuring out how to set up your stream or that kind of thing, I've got a lot of knowledge. I know it can be very difficult to get any kind of OBS tutoring past any very basic knowledge because everyone has the same clickbait tutorial where it doesn't actually go into depth. But I have that wisdom to share, and I'm happy to.
That is absolutely amazing. And it's just great to see, especially how much it's kind of snowballed to the point where, sure, it can be hard to handle, but that just makes it that much more impressive that you're able to help so many people and provide so much benefit, and that so many people are so eager to participate in that and share that love.
Yeah, it's a magical thing for sure.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you. For Alan, and on the hotline side, what is something that most people don't realize about what it's like to support someone through a call?
So maybe this is a little, maybe this is a little more obvious, but there are people who call the hotline and you as an operator are the first trans person they've ever knowingly spoken to in their lives. People call us from not only geographical locations that can be extremely isolated, but also just a lot of our callers, particularly those who are questioning or who aren't out, don't have any semblance of trans community in their lives. And so sometimes, again, this is the first time that they have spoken to another trans person. Sometimes it's the first time they've said the words, I think I'm trans, or I know I'm trans, to somebody else. Sometimes you are there to witness what might be one of their most profound life-changing moments, and you kind of have to have an extreme amount of humility and reverence for that person and what they're going through, and you kind of have to be there to again witness what might be a super pivotal event in their life. Maybe that is obvious, but it's not really something that I necessarily expected when I started this work, and that's been really transformative. And again, being that point of contact when somebody virtually, has nobody else in their life who understands, is it's a big honor, and it's not something that I, again, necessarily anticipated when I started.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think sometimes the things that don't seem like something that would surprise you end up being the most surprising. And I think you represented that well, of just how a lot of times you're probably going to be the first person they've ever talked to who's had something in common with them like that. For our next question, a lot of people think crisis lines are only for the absolute worst moments. What would you say to someone who's struggling but unsure if they qualify to call?
That's all you, Ellen.
Okay. That's what I assumed, but I just wanted to make sure. So I actually get this question a lot on the hotline. I will get callers who start off a conversation by saying, I'm not suicidal. I'm kind of feeling okay, but I do want to talk to somebody. Is it okay? And it absolutely is, because we take calls from people whether they're in active crisis or not. It really does not matter. And we also take calls from people who are, questioning their gender identity, or just want to talk about gender in some way, want to get like a deeper analysis of it, and want to think about how they feel about it. And yeah, maybe they're not in active crisis, but it's still life-changing and life-saving work, because they may not necessarily be able to have this conversation anywhere else. The other thing that we find, or that we found over time, is that giving trans people and non-binary people an option to talk to somebody who may have more of an understanding of what they're experiencing can help actually like prevent crisis situations from escalating over time. So if you have a regular outlet to talk about things that are on your mind as a trans person, again, where you're not really going to get those opportunities elsewhere, it can kind of stave off the worst, possible outcome of that experience. So if you're, kind of existing in isolation, and you have no place to discuss how you're feeling ever, you can kind of see how easily over time that could like fester and fester and spill over into an active crisis. When maybe something else in a person's life goes wrong, it can all just kind of come together and turn into a situation that becomes impossible to navigate. So by giving people an opportunity to just check in with us regularly, again, even if they're not in active crisis, I think we're doing some crisis prevention work. So I would say, regardless of how you're feeling, it's absolutely okay to call us and talk to us and tell us what's on your mind. Because again, a lot of people don't have that regular point of contact, and that's in part what we're trying to provide.
Wonderful. I think that is absolutely beautiful. And yeah, it's a very true fact that mental health and emotional health are something that are best taken care of as a preventative measure, not just waiting until it goes to a crisis, which is unfortunately what a lot of people tend to think is what is the requirement for that. Thank you so much, Alan. I believe this one can apply to both of you in your respective fields, but what is something small but meaningful that Trans Lifeline does behind the scenes that more people should know about?
Yeah, I think our advocacy work in general kind of goes on mostly behind the scenes. Like our report Problem with 988, even before it was published, we're having a lot of conversations with local hotlines. We've ended up kind of moving the needle towards less non-consensual interventions, like for the hotline, for the 988 number worldwide. But there's also other little bits of advocacy we do all the time. Even my coworkers that help in fundraising, doing like grant writing, they are educating about what we are and what we do and the importance of our work all the time to people that end up proliferating that knowledge. And same with the streamers that I take care of and also that support us through the streamathons and fundraising for us. Like each one of those opportunities is an opportunity for education and advocacy, and that becomes an there's like a trickle. I don't know what I'm trying to say, like a spider web effect of helping people see the value of our work. And it's not just like the value of our work, but like the value of trans people in general, and the value of um, having like gentle community care, and having a hotline that has holds itself to a higher standard. Like all those things are things we should expect of this world and the caregivers in our world that aren't necessarily given to us. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Steph. Alan, you have anything you'd like to add on this question?
Yeah, maybe it's not like super behind the scenes, but I'm not sure how many people are aware of it. We used to have something called a micro grants department. And we are, I think, making a concerted effort to bring that back, or at least, revive some aspects of it, because it did suffer a kind of defunding for a period of time. But I do think that it is getting back on track. And essentially what micro grants does, as the name implies, is that it provides small stipends to trans people in need, to put toward efforts like getting an ID and name change, updating documents, paying for like all the court associated fees that come with those ID and documentation changes. And I feel like that's even more important now, as we see some of the recent legislation and pushback against trans rights, kind of severely affect what we're able to change and what kind of documentation we're able to access. And then furthermore, it's extremely helpful because unfortunately we know that many of us, especially, our callers, face a large degree of economic disenfranchisement. We are, kind of as a community just suffering financially. So if it's, I think, been really meaningful to provide those small stipends to people. And even though they are, they're not like exorbitant amounts of money, it's usually enough, again, to help somebody at least fund things like name changes and gender marker changes, so that they can be a little bit more safe and they can proceed with, aspects of their transition. So it's not, officially up and running yet, I don't think, but I do believe that we are on track to kind of, resurrect the whole micro grants efforts. I don't know if it's the same department anymore, but the same services will eventually be provided to the community.
yeah,
Well,
I can speak a little bit more to that. That
please do.
we are on track for microgrants to be coming back later this year, which is really really exciting. We got funding for that, and yeah, we were in a funding crisis like just a year ago, I think. But fortunately, we're back a little restructured, and have the funding to bring back microgrants. And I have heard that we still have to figure it out because it is a little bit legally difficult to just give people money. But fortunately, we've kind of gotten that clearance. From what I understand from the IRS, from having such a good record with our microgrants program in the past. So I believe our microgrants program, when it comes back, will be even less restricted to things that are just very specific, but more like, general need, on a case by case basis. We'll be able to give funds to the community. And also, Trans Lifeline has been around for just over 10 years now. And during that time, we've given out over $1.5 million of aid through our microgrants program, which includes all the things that Alan talked about. But Also, we provided commissary to incarcerated trans folks, as well as some like gender affirming care, like laser hair removal, that kind of thing. So I personally hope um, we'll be able to help with covering costs of HRT and hormones, especially with the threat of that getting taken away from Medicaid. Yeah, thanks so much for bringing that up, Alan. Appreciate that.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That is such a powerful way to help. And of course, I'm sure it is legally tricky, but it's very, very encouraging to see that you've been able to figure that out as an organization and hopefully be able to start operating that program again and supporting people in all the things that they need for life. Our next question is going to be for you both, but what kind of emotional supports or community do you rely on to keep doing this work? Go ahead and start with Alan this time.
Yeah, I mean, I am really, really fortunate to have access to my local trans community, and it's been interesting because I live in I live in the city where I was basically born and raised, and um I've seen such a strong and passionate community of people sort of coalesce over time. Trans and non-binary people who are extremely supportive and um, extremely willing to do just like mutual aid work, even if that's really a kind of informal kind of mutual aid work. So, people who are supporting each other when we have like financial difficulties, people who provide emotional support to one another. The amount of, I think, out like trans and non-binary people in my like city and county has just um, grown like almost exponentially. I feel since I came out, and honestly, though I'm not young. That was years ago. Um, and so I am very lucky to be very directly involved and like decently known, in that general group of people. So yeah, I would say it's my community and my friends. I've just been really lucky in that regard.
Amazing. That is absolutely wonderful. And Steph, how about you?
I think I think my avatar speaks for itself here. VR chat has been my home. Virtual communities have been so helpful for me to connect with just connect with a community that feels really healthy. I'm trying to navigate what I want to say very carefully because yeah, I was a full-time streamer for like 7 years, and it was incredible to have, this community that was building around me and also fostering connections between trans people, especially because I was one of the first trans streamer out and like proud trans streamers on Twitch at the time. So I'm responsible for a few marriages and that kind of thing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I didn't. Yeah, it was my community, but it wasn't the same as having a community I was part of. And there's something really special about being around peers that are helping peers and will help you out when you're down or aren't, relying on you being okay. Like this world that's functioning even when you're not in it is just such a beautiful thing. The events, the art exhibits, the raves are all going to go on whether or not you're there. And that's a sign of a really healthy community. And still, it's like, because it's not something that's all, only there when I turn on the stream and only healthy when I'm healthy. It's got its own thing going on. And that just really kind of restarting my life and entering VR and finding friends and finding like people who really valued me for me, like very genuinely, was a hugely transformative part of my life. So I owe VR chat a lot. Been playing this game for I don't I actually let me let me not figure out how long. It's been a while though.
I know exactly what you mean, though. It is just a beautiful way to find community, especially finding community just across the entire world that is there no matter the time of day. Having a community in both IRL and in VR is something that can be very, very influential and very, very powerful in making sure we have the support networks we need.
hmm Yeah, the connections we make in VR are very novel and interesting because they aren't bounded by geography. Unfortunately, they're bounded by like this privilege to be able to afford, the ability to be embodied in this space. Can be pretty cost prohibitive, but after that, like we are connected to people all over the globe, and there's something really inspiring and hopeful about that.
Absolutely. Our next question is: has working at Trans Lifeline changed how you think about care or even about being trans? We'll go ahead and start with Steph this time and then Alan.
I don't know if it changed. I don't know if this was too much of a change, but I just wanna say that it's, it's just humans all the way down, like, when I was outside of Trans Lifeline, I kind of put Trans Lifeline on a pedestal when I was raising money for it and like kind of held it in a lot of reverence. And now that's shifted as I've worked for Trans Lifeline and been internally for Trans Lifeline. I still have so much reverence for it, but there's been a tremendous like humanizing shift to my work here, like realizing that all my coworkers are also humans trying their best. Like, we're all trying to make this work as best as we can, but ultimately we're all flawed in all the ways that we're flawed, and I think there's something really beautiful about that, and I'm really glad for things like this where we get to introduce ourselves and talk about our work, because I don't think we do that often enough, honestly. I want to see Trans Lifeline humanize itself a little bit more, so because that was a beautiful thing for me to witness.
Amazing. Alan, how about you?
Yeah, so it's maybe kind of an unusual take, but I think that working in like a crisis de-escalation role has changed the way I think about supporting people, because there was a lot that I didn't foresee about the work until I was actually in the thick of it. Um, and that is that when you're supporting someone, and especially when they're in situations that seemingly have like no tangible or like feasible solutions, and you have to come up with something to de-escalate them, something to get them through one more day. You really have to think critically on your feet, and it's demanding. It can be challenging, because you do want to show up equally for everyone, and that takes a lot of mental energy and sometimes strength that I didn't necessarily think I had. And I found that, what kind of grew out of that was maybe a level-headedness and maturity that I didn't have years ago before I started this work. And I do feel like even reaching like that level of self-actualization and even reaching that level of maturity as a trans person is something that we don't get to experience a lot. Because if you're constantly fighting just to be who you are, um, just to survive in this world, you don't really always necessarily get the opportunity to um, feel like or become an adult, like in some ways. And um, Sorry if that got like weirdly
No,
deep.
no, I'm just vibing with it.
But I have found that it's actually it's made me think of like adulthood in a different way. And again, I recognize that that's a really like privileged place to be, because so many of us don't get there, and that really sucks. But that's why I do this work, because I want people to get there.
Amazing. And thank you so much for the work that you do. Our next question is primarily for Steph. When you think about the gaming or streaming spaces you work in, what makes them feel affirming, or what still needs to shift?
Ooh. Um, yeah, it depends on the scale you're looking at. Live streaming in general, I mean, I would say it's not controversial to call Twitch as a whole to be quite a toxic space. And the live streaming world is quite toxic as well. Just in general, I think so yeah, that's kind of a difficult question for me to dig into. Um, and it has a lot of parallels. I think about a lot of parallels to kind of the world we live in and community space, and kind of this like attention economy that we're part of, where people are really desperate for more exposure and to make it. And unfortunately for a lot of the trans streamers, like that's their survival. They don't have they might not be able to find work for whatever reason, and streaming is their only source of revenue, even if it's meager. And that can breed a very like competitive space within the trans and queer streaming world, which builds a lot of distrust over like streaming teams. And a lot of stream teams are just to try to empower the person that made them. So I'm glad that since I'm not a streamer anymore, I can kind of approach these communities with more of a mindset of equity and building each other up, and more like trust. They aren't about me. They're like Trans Lifeline's work, and when we all get together, we can create amazing things. All this collaboration, the rising tide really floats all boats. And if we could, if we had 100 streamers and we all shared the spotlight one at a time, each time a spotlight is on someone, they would get that more viewership, that more organic engagement. So yes, I guess the answer is I would like to see streaming be more unionized, because that would be very powerful for our community.
Amazing. Yeah, it's super important to foster that sense of community and like not competing against one another, but actually building up each other and sharing that space and helping use influence that you might have gathered to help someone else gather that influence as well.
Yeah, and yeah, if you can trust each other to share, then everyone benefits. But unfortunately, a lot of people write checks that they don't intend to cash, so that happens unfortunately often. So I understand the disgust. I guess I want to validate that, but hopefully we can make something better.
Yes. Our next question is, what is a story or moment, without naming names, of course, that stuck with you? Something that reminded you about how this work really matters? Starting this time with Alan.
So I'm gonna tread kind of carefully here, just because and kind of speak in generalities, because I don't want to like tell a story and then find out I tell a story about somebody who's watching this right now.
Yeah, you wouldn't want someone's own personal story to just suddenly be put on blast, that's for sure.
Yeah, but I think there's some really rewarding aspects of this work. So for example, you may one day get a call from someone who is questioning their identity, and they're really torn and they don't know which way to go. They don't know if they should consider transitioning to whatever extent or whatever that looks like for them. And they're stuck and they're frustrated and they're upset. And sometimes they just want to end it all because they can't even wrap their head around the possible, like, you know, consequences of making a decision like that. What is my family going to think? What about my relationship, with my partner? What about my relationship sometimes, like, with my kids? What about work? I mean, there's, I think a lot of us are kind of intimately familiar with that struggle, unfortunately. But sometimes, you'll get a caller, maybe a repeat caller, who is just, has really no answers, doesn't know what to do, and consequently is, suicidal. And then you might hear from that same person, a year later, and they say something like, yeah, you gave me some resources and I found a gender affirming therapist and I started HRT, and not everything in my life is perfect, but it was the right decision for me. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate that. We do get calls like that sometimes. And it's, as I mentioned, really rewarding to witness someone's like transformation, and how much, the services that we've provided have helped turn around their life to some extent. And I'm not saying we're, the kind of the only factor in that, but giving somebody, a way forward, even if it's difficult, is really great to see. And sometimes people will tell you about those things, or share good news with you on the phone.
Aw, that's amazing.
I'd
Wonderful,
say
yeah.
something similar. I often, well, not often is relative, but I do a fair amount of tabling for Trans Lifeline. So, like, we're at TwitchCon every year, and sometimes more events than that. But it's those opportunities. We get all sorts of people coming up to the booth, but it's pretty often that people show up to thank us for something that the Trans Lifeline has done for them several years ago, which is really cool to be working in an org that, like, has a legacy of care. And as the current custodians of the org, we get to kind of see how our legacy has helped people. But it's very motivating.
Aw, that is amazing. It does, I think, provide a unique sense of reward just knowing that your work has helped people. You see and know the stories of the people who you have been able to been there. And while it may not necessarily be the entire thing, even just being a step on that journey towards getting better is such a powerful, powerful feeling. Our next question is, what is one thing you wish more people, especially cis allies or big platforms, understood about what trans people go through? Starting with Steph.
So much. I would say that trans people are just trying to be our best selves. I think all trans people are trying to, like, self-actualize and become who they want to be and become their higher self. And that higher self just happens to be trans. It just happens to be not the gender that we were, assigned at birth. And I think the cis community and just kind of thinks that we're just trying to transition. They don't, like, understand that we're also trying to take off the mask and be an authentic person with all the things that come with that. And also, they could learn that themselves. I think that's something that's, like, kind of scary about what trans people bring to the conversation, is like this. I'm trying to find the right word. on the tip of my tongue, but it's like, that self-determination. That's it, which is like an American value, is the ability to have self-determination and pursue life and liberty and happiness. Like that is something we all want. And that's what trans people are trying to get. We're not just trying to be boys. We're not just trying to be girls. We're trying to be us, who we are.
Absolutely. Alan, how about you?
Yeah, I think I think that's absolutely true. I think that, if I consider, maybe what I would imagine like the typical life of a like white cisgender heterosexual like middle class person, like what that looks like. I would say, like, if, and I know that this is like a huge generalization, but for people who aren't trans and who do have a degree of privilege, um, probably not every day of their life can, probably, I would imagine that probably not every day of their life feels like a crisis or like a catastrophe. But if you're trans, you know, a day with, multiple disasters in them, because I don't know, let's say you need to go to the doctor and you can't go to a doctor because you don't have health insurance, and you are terrified of encountering like a bigoted medical, like so-called professional. And then let's say you also can't feed yourself because you don't have a job, because you've been, you've been struggling with hiring discrimination. All of these things are like typical, like a typical day in the life of a trans person. And I think for somebody who doesn't experience that, that would be extremely abnormal. But for us, that's just a Wednesday, So there's these constant kind of hurdles that we have to jump over and navigate, that I don't think a lot of, again, kind of white, cisgender, heterosexual people recognize. And I don't, and, also don't understand psychologically what that does to a person. So people in our community can experience like kind of a constant state of crisis, and it's all because of again, these like systemic obstacles that we face. So yeah, crisis is unfortunately just very common. And these circumstances might be seen as extreme by people who don't experience them regularly.
I think you two bring up very good points. A lot of it just comes down to understanding, knowing that what our needs are, what our story is, everything like that is something that needs to be understood. And oftentimes there is just that lack of understanding because it's not something that they're going through. And it's obviously a very common thing of, if someone's not going through something you've gone through, it's hard to really understand just how much it can affect our lives.
Yeah, a lot of people think that everyone else has the same brain as them. Like, it causes a lot of disagreement and argument and strife, because they're like, I convinced myself of this thing and you have the same brain as me, so you're just lacking the understanding I have. While in reality, truth can be shaped, or like perspective can shape truth. So it's just really important to
Absolutely.
have an open mind. But trans people know this, obviously.
We've
For the
gone
most
through that
part.
whole rigmarole
Yeah.
already.
Yes.
Our next question is, do you have any advice for folks who want to get involved or help support the Trans Lifeline organization, especially in creative or digital spaces? Starting with Steph and then Alan.
Yeah. Yeah. Alan can probably speak more to where we are on having volunteers, but in digital or creative spaces, I mean, spreading the word about our work, like what y'all are doing here, is really cool. Shout out to VR Chat, the organization, for raising money for Trans Lifeline this Pride. That is incredible. If you want to stream, I'm your girl. You can reach out to me. Once again, my email is steph@translifeline.org. If you have any questions about that, like, feel free to reach out. But anything that helps provide peer support to trans people, who helps empower trans folks, like, in a way, you're supporting our org because you're supporting the work of our org, even if it's not direct support. Like, peer support happens in a whole lot of different ways. And hopefully, maybe we can inspire you to do that a little bit more often in the communities that you're part of and the communities you can touch. I generally have a philosophy that this, like, tapestry of human connection is really how we're going to set ourselves free and build resiliency and strength in the future, especially during these really hard times. It's all about these people you know and these people that you trust, and that's like a friend network that's connected to a friend network that's connected to a friend network. I've really seen that grow in the trans community over time, especially in the last few years, and I hope we just continue to do that and know, as you are building those bonds and those relationships that are, like, really built on trust, the kinds of connections where it's like, if someone random were to speak ill of your friend, you would ask for your friend's opinion on that, or, like, not trust, you would have a better relationship with that friend that was be strong enough to not be broken by that outside influence. um, if that makes sense. But, like, that's really important right now, because there are forces that are trying to divide us, and we can just kind of, if we just hold on to a few threads around us and everyone does that, then we can build a really robust network. And especially with VR Chat, we're building that worldwide, which um,
Absolutely.
is changing the world already.
Indeed, it is. Alan, how about you?
Yeah, so I can speak more to like the volunteer aspect of things. So we are, as I mentioned earlier, still actively taking volunteers. There is like an application process, but I'm not sure if there's any kind of misconceptions about out there about what qualifies you to be a volunteer. And I do want to say that anybody within the community can get involved. We don't require any like extensive academic background. We don't require that you have like a certain kind of knowledge. The only thing that we really look for, and that is crucial to us, is that you just share the same peer support values that we do, and that means that we just want volunteers who we know are not going to dial 911 on our callers against their will. We want people who take an abolitionist approach to things like policing. We want volunteers who, again, even if you don't think that you have the kind of pre-existing like background or life experience to be an operator, it does not matter. We will train you. Again, I think all we really look for is that your philosophy um, on peer support and people's autonomy and self-determination meshes with ours. I think that's really all we care about. So if those are strongly held values to you, that's great. And if you do want to get involved, we have a volunteer coordinator who helps onboard you. I like to think that as trainers and as fellow operators, we're there to provide ongoing support. It's not necessarily always easy, but it is rewarding. And it is also a great way to just kind of connect with community.
Wonderful. It's absolutely amazing. And volunteer work is such a powerful tool for helping, and especially helping out with organizations like the Trans Lifeline, because you need people to be able to do things and people that share those same values. And the best way to do that is through people who want to give their time for that manner and help provide a way to give the support that helps then build the communities that we need to hold on to, build the bonds that we need to hold on to. Finding even just a moment of space for you to find that connection with someone and then build that network is something that's very, very powerful. And I think a great way to help support the organization, help support the people around us, help support the community as a whole. Thank you very much. And with that, we are just about at time, but we have one last question for the both of you, which is something more just for fun. But what's something that brings you joy lately, big or small? We'll go ahead and start with Alan on this one, and then Steph.
Mostly my cat, who is
Aww.
extremely needy and very bonded to me. I also do artwork, and that's kind of just a fun hobby. Not super like serious, but yeah, I have had some like shows recently, and that's been really fun. So I enjoy that, and it is pretty grounding.
Oh, amazing. That's absolutely wonderful. And for you, Steph?
Art also. Yeah, I just had a show for Rain Dance Immersive earlier today. I'll have another showing tomorrow. We're probably gonna have to add more shows because it's so sold out. The wait list would be a sold out show if the wait list had a show. So we're probably gonna have to figure that out. But yeah, I do a lot of dance and VR chat, and even when I started VR chat, when I came into VR, I had only been a dancer in the closet. Like, it was just something I did when the family was asleep, late at night. My grandparents heard little Steph dancing one time and told my parents, and I just gaslit my grandparents that they didn't hear anything. My parents believed me. It was awful. Anyway, I was deep in the closet about my dancing, but then coming into VR chat, I was like, oh wow, I can really dance here. Like, I feel safe enough to be witnessed because of this medium being as safe as it is, and that was really profound, and it's been giving me joy ever since.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, that is absolutely wonderful. And that was the last question we had. So let me go ahead and finish us out by saying thank you so much for being here and for sharing all this lovely stuff with us, for sharing your organization and for doing all the work that you do to support the community. It's something that truly is not just needed, but appreciated. And having an organization like yours that supports everyone and other organizations help do their stuff, as well as just helping people build that community, is truly, truly beautiful. You do absolutely amazing work. And I certainly hope you're able to keep it up. Something tells me I know you will.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much for having us.
of
And to
course,
all of
thank
VR
you so
chat supporting
much.
us this month. It's incredible.
Yes. Thank you again. This has been an absolutely lovely time, and I hope we get the chance to be able to see you doing amazing things in the future as well. Until then, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya.